Hi, I'm Karin Hurt, and I'm here with our next edition of Asking for a Friend. And we have actually recorded this show, but I am going to be commenting with you in the chat. So if you have questions, you have thoughts, let's continue the conversation. Today, we are welcoming Thomas Wedell-Wedellsborg, who is talking about reframing problems. So Thomas, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karin. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So I have to start where I always do, which is what has been one source of inspiration or strength for you during this particularly challenging last couple of years?
I'd say it's very clearly been when I've met people who are also into idea exploration. Like whenever I've had like a call with somebody, or sometimes a careful face-to-face meeting, and just sitting and like playing together around a new idea or question, I find that wildly invigorating. And I just started to notice that whenever I did that, I got a little bit of a lift for the rest of the week.
Oh, I am really with you. You see, we've got our light bulbs, right? When you are in a meeting and you see that look in someone's eyes and they see a new way of possibility or a new way of thinking about things, really is very inspiring. And of course, we've had a lot of problems. It's just
a few.
So I was very intrigued by your work because it is so related to the work that we've been doing on micro innovation and problem solving and encouraging people to speak up and raise their hand when they see problems and also when they have ideas of ways to do things differently. And I love your concept of reframing, so your book, what's your problem? Are you solving the right problem? Is a really interesting question for me. And I know for a number of our clients. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, when you say reframing, what does that mean?
I'll share an example with you. We've kind of been trained to think that problem solving has two components, namely, you analyze the problem and then you jump in and solve it. But there's this third thing called framing the problem. And the example is, if you imagine you are the owner of an office building and your tenants in the building, well, they are complaining a lot, like they're saying, oh, the elevator is too slow. Now, that problem, a lot of people will just jump into solution mode and figure out, okay, how do we make the elevator faster? But if you ask a really experienced landlord, they're actually going to suggest something very different. They're going to suggest solving a different problem, namely focusing on, oh no, maybe it's the wait that's the issue, the fact that people are waiting. And what can you do about a wait? Well, you could put up a mirror in the hallway to kind of distract people from whatever is going on.
Their hair.
Yeah, they're like, oh my God, no, you can take this elevator. I'm still kind of, what you're seeing in the feed there is like the more extended version of this tool, which is a process I share, and we can delve into that a little bit later. But the core concept there of the slow elevator really captures the difference between solving a problem, how do we make the elevator faster, analyzing it, which is to say, oh, why is the elevator slow? And that question is maybe not the right question to focus on. Better question, framing it better, is to go in and say, wait, is the speed of the elevator really the problem we should be paying attention to here? Or maybe is it the weight or something different? So that's like reframing in a nutshell, the art of solving the right problems.
I really thought that was such a powerful example because as you were explaining that, you were saying, and I'm like, well, maybe the elevator really is slow. And, so if you just put up the mirrors, that still may or may not solve the problem. But then you say, okay, but how do we even know it's slow?
Yeah.
And just not taking, the tenant's word for that.
Right? Really beautiful example, right? Like, and a key point here, what you're mentioning is the elevator may or may not be slow. The question is not what's the real problem. It is more, is there a better problem to solve? Like, is there a smarter way of addressing this than necessarily tackling, like going out and buying an expensive elevator? So really, really key insight.
Fantastic. So what inspired you to get so interested in the deep research that you've done and to write this book?
Basically, I noticed that people were bad at it. Like I wrote my first book together with Patty Miller here. That's like 8 years ago now on innovation, and that led me to do a lot of work with companies all over the world. And I just more and more realized that even really really smart, talented people weren't necessarily very skilled at this issue of are we solving the right problems. And so once I realized how widespread the problem was, 85% of the companies I spoke to said, "Oh, we're bad at this." Then I was like, "Oh God, we got to fix this." And then I wrote the book.
Fantastic. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your process? Because what I loved about it, it was very practical, and say a team really could go through that process themselves if they needed to think through this.
Yeah, I have a deep belief in accessibility of the work we do, because so often there's like a really good idea, but it's expressed kind of in a way that's not very, you don't immediately grasp it. And so everything I tried to do with the book was really to say, how do we make this really hands-on and practical, even down to like doing the drawings in the book that are kind of, it's intended for the reader to almost be capable of replicating those. The actual process, like on a very high level, it's basically creating the habit in a team of saying, whenever you run into a problem, wait a second, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And is that not necessarily the right problem to solve? Like this can be 5 minutes, but having that habit of mind almost of always taking a little bit of a pit stop and just checking if you're solving the right problem. That's the way to go. And that if you can build that practice with yourself, with your team, with your family for that matter, you can really just save a lot of time and money sometimes by not solving the wrong problems.
Yes. And we're going to dig into your pictures in a moment, because I have replicated them too, because I was thinking about our own company. And then I was also thinking about some of the clients that we're neck deep in working with right now. And I'm like, these are good things to be thinking about. So as we start with this, one of the things that was really coming up for me is we have a process we call Own the Ugly. And it's a way to think about problems differently. So what are we underestimating? G, what's got to go? L, where are we losing? And Y, where are we missing the yes? Now that we do at the beginning of a process before we're thinking of ideas, to think about things more broadly. And one of the challenges is it uncovers so much. And to your point, oh, great. Now we have a lot of problems to solve, not just the one we thought we had. So speak to that. What do you do when you get too much reframing, and how do you narrow it down?
Yeah, I love how, so I discovered this with the very early days when I started practicing this, and a participant in one of my workshops told me, you know what, like slightly sarcastically, he said, I started with one problem, now I have 10 problems. Thank you.
Right.
Kind of I think the mistake you can make here is to think you have to be super systematic and evaluate. Let's say you brainstormed on like something like the slow elevator problem, or maybe an issue around, hey, why is our team disengaged? And you brainstorm your way to maybe 8 different ways of thinking about the problem. What you should not do is to try to systematically go through this like a spreadsheet and kind of like that. That just kills whatever energy and momentum you're trying to maintain. The trick is to notice the things that are unusual, that strike you as, oh, I hadn't thought about that, because that tends to mean that there's kind of something in your mental model of the problem that you have not thought about. So any surprising things you hear, anything that you kind of like, oh, that could actually explain why this has been happening if we think about it that way. You're not looking to do a systematic analysis at this point. You're looking to maintain momentum, and that just means sometimes, oh, pick one of those framings and maybe explore that a little bit more. Hey, the two of you, can you kind of look into that, talk to a few people, see if there's something about that, and then you move forward. Moving forward, critically important. You don't want to lose momentum in a problem-solving process. You want to make sure you have thinking breaks. But if you end up going 2 weeks to a mountain and thinking deep thoughts, well, you're kind of losing the point of moving forward.
Yeah, and sometimes the problem has to be solved quickly. And so and you were saying you can reframe even in the midst of an urgent problem, taking a moment of pause.
Really big insight for me. I think there's been this misconception. You know that old saying, purportedly from Einstein, but he actually never said it, about if I had an hour, I'd take 55 minutes to think about the problem. Like, that's wrong. Like, that just means you're stuck in analysis mode. Like, you actually want to get that practice of doing this even in a few minutes. That can be enough for somebody to pinpoint that you actually have a blind spot. Oh, wait, why have we spoken to the tenants in the building about why they don't like it? Is it just because they're impatient, or is it because they're late for something important? That's a different problem to solve.
Yes, yes. And I thought, you even said, oh, well, maybe you just need to schedule the lunch shift breaks if it's if it's a commercial building. So lots and lots of different ways to look at that. So one of my favorite, I resonated very, very strongly with your technique of looking at the bright spots. And I tell a story in our book about Yomi. And and if people have heard my keynote around this, they know that what we reframed the problem. So I had a big problem when I was working at Verizon of selling phones when we were competing with the iPhone, and Verizon did not yet have the iPhone, and all the customers were porting out their phones. And it was a real problem leading a 2,200 person sales team. But I went to look for the bright spots, and I found Yomi. And this one guy was selling 20 lines at a time to the small business space. And so we reframed the problem, not how can we sell more retail phones in this moment, but how can we change the market focus and really tap into small businesses. And that team ended up winning the President's Award for Customer Growth for overall revenue, right? But if we hadn't found the bright spot, though, we would have still been looking at that problem a different way.
So classic of us, I think, to focus only on the negative things, like, oh, this part is going wrong, while not realizing that there's somebody like Yomi over there who's actually found a way to solve the problem. And if we only pay attention to that, we might take whatever Yomi is doing and spread it out to everybody.
Yes.
Like, really, really powerful method. Like, a bit of context. I don't know, Jared, if you can show that canvas you put up in the beginning to put context on this. It's really in the book, what I did was to try to pin down what type of questions are good to ask. If you only have 5 minutes, you're not just doing a question fest. You are actually trying to be targeted about finding new angles. And you can see here, this, by the way, is available for free download if you want to delve deep into it. But like, the 5 strategies I found that were more impactful in terms of quickly generating new perspectives on a problem. Looking outside the frame, rethinking the goal, examining bright spots, what we just spoke about here, looking in the mirror, which means examining your own role, and of course, taking their perspective. Like Karin, with your work in the book around the customer advocates, like making sure somebody thinks about, hey, what's actually going on their side, on the client side, or whoever you're working with.
Yes, yes. So we must look in the mirror. Let's talk about looking in the mirror, because I think it really seasoned, smart executives sometimes wrestle with this. Like, I've seen this movie before. They're pretty sure they have. Yeah. So how do you coach someone in that environment who may be stuck?
I think it depends on their level of stuckness. There are some people that just need to be reminded that I know that it's very easy to think about a problem as you being the victim and like the perpetrators are these idiots over here. But maybe there's something you're doing or not doing which actually kind of contributes to the problem. Now, for some people, it's enough to remind them of that, maybe at the right time, and then they'll kind of look more critically at their own role. But in other cases, if that's not possible, what you want to try to do is manage the guest list of who is in that part, that discussion. Like, sometimes it can help just to bring somebody else in who can offer a different perspective. If you don't feel you're in a position to do it, that it's almost like a little bit of a. I don't know if you found this in your work with courageous cultures, but if you're in a position where for some reason it's hard to be courageous, well, maybe you can actually invite a guest who can be courageous on your behalf. Like, or even just gathering customer feedback and saying, hey, you know what? We thought that too, but then look at what all of our customers are saying. Isn't that funny? Maybe we should examine this. Yes.
Yes. Very good. All right. So one of the, and when you and I were exchanging pre-show, you said you've got to look at this so you can see the visuals, and so I was like, oh, I'm so curious. I loved your visuals, and to your point, it is something that if you were working in a team, you could just go write it on an easel sheet to think about it. So I made these for us, and what I'd love for you to do is share your perspective on it and like flashcards, right?
Great.
And then if you have a story, because some of these come with really good stories. All right.
Let's do it.
All right, Jared, let's go full screen here. This is problems we are really good at solving and the problem we actually have.
Yeah, typical issue, right? That we are driven by our tools. If we are really, really good at a specific method or technique or whatever, we just keep applying that. And that's okay because, hey, it's worked in the past. But the mistake happens when we then suddenly see, oh, this is actually a different problem, but we still keep using the old tool. Like the classic example I use to share is if let's say you're in a relationship and whenever you have to get out of the door, one party is kind of not very good at leaving on time. Now, you've tried kind of getting a bit of upset and maybe yelling a bit, and you've tried that 50 times. Now, is that a good investment of your time? Because clearly the first 49 times, it didn't work. Maybe there's something else going on. So super simple method. Just whenever you find yourself reapplying a technique that didn't work the first time, maybe it's a time to take a step back and say, wait, do we need to think differently about this situation versus keep using the same old hammer?
It's funny because we are neck deep in this problem. So we have pivoted to, of course, doing lots and lots of live online leadership development work. The problem that we have is that we are out of hours. All right. So we've continued to get more and more creative. Well, how can we do more? How can we reschedule? How can we shift so we can serve everybody who's asking us for these programs? The problem we actually have is we need other methodologies of helping people. Right. And it can't just be always us facilitating this because, you can only solve that same problem to an extent before you're exhausted. And so we've had to actually step back and say, how else can we serve? And so I really resonated with that one. Okay.
Beautiful. Yeah. Love that example.
Here's a good one. Period of time we're focused on something that happened earlier. And you have a nice example in the book or any other example you might want to share on that.
Yeah, I mean, the example I think everybody with kids can relate to is that let's say your teenage daughter comes back from school and is really upset, because she got into a fight with the teacher. And that's not like her. And so you start really asking about, oh, wait, what did you say to the teacher? What did the teacher say back? Like you delve into the details of the conflict. What you may actually want to ask is kind of, wait, was there something that happened before the conflict that affected this? Like, did she stay up all night texting with her friends? Did she forget to eat breakfast this morning? And that caused the fight. It isn't that the solution isn't to focus on the fight and who said what. It is to examine the conditions around it and say, wait, was there something that happened earlier that caused this problem?
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. This was probably my favorite story in the book. Okay. The original goal statement, higher level goal. Is there an alternative way to get there?
Yeah, we tend not to question our goals. Like we tend to just take our goals for granted and then spend all our brain power on how to achieve them. Here's a very memorable story of somebody who thought differently. It's a story about a man who hated his boss. He worked in a company. He really loved the company. He loved his industry. Like everything was great, but this person he just could not get along with. And so he decides to go to a headhunter and say, hey, can you help me find a new job? The headhunter says, sure. There's a lot of demand for experienced executives such as yourself at the moment. It'll be very easy to find you something new. That could have been the end of the story. Except the man subsequently that night spoke to his wife. And the wife was fairly talented at the problem solving and thinking about solving the right problems. And so together they actually came up with a better plan. The next morning, the man goes back to the headhunter and he says he hands the headhunter the CV of his boss and says, hey, can you find a new job for this guy? And according to the story, this is an old story from Robert Sternberg, that actually happens. Like the boss, not knowing anything about what's going on, like gets a new job offer, accepts, and the leader ends up being promoted into the old boss's job. So very beautiful example of rethinking what success could look like. Is it about getting away from your boss, or is Or is it about finding a new job for your boss so you can remain in the company you love?
Yeah, I wish I had heard that story 10 years earlier, I will tell you. So, okay, here's our last one. And this, I really resonated with this too in our work. Your very unique problem and the large group of people with the same problem, right? And I think that is so true. And of course, and I think you unpack this really well, because of course, every problem is unique and every company is unique. So you want to share a little bit about your perspective on that?
It's just the recognition that there are kind of deep structures and similarities across problems. Of course, a problem is unique. Nobody has been in the specific relationship you're in with your boss or your kids or whatever. But there's a ton of people who've had conflicts with their kids or their boss or whatever. Like, so the second you start thinking about the problem, actually like abstracting from the details, that's when you can start finding help with other people. I have this experience every time I run a workshop where people say, oh, no, my problem is highly unique and new to the history of the world. And 5 minutes later, after a discussion with two other people, they say, hey, we all have the same problem. Like,
Yes.
it's just so clear that even people in completely disparate industries or parts of the world, we just have similarities. And the second we realize that, we can do something really crucial, which is to bring other people into the discussion about what the problem is. It is, if we try to do it alone, we are too close to our own problems. We can't see them clearly. Bringing in other people tends to be the panacea almost, that just helps you spot your kind of blind angles faster.
Yes. I am always amazed at how in the same day I can talk to two different executives from two wildly different industries, and they are describing their problem. And I'm laughing because it's so similar, and yet their businesses are so different. So, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
gosh, we have covered a lot, but I want to make sure that if there are other insights that you have for our listeners here on Asking for a Friend, that you want to make sure we hear about it. And if you're interested in telling us about, I know you're working on a new project. If you're ready to share any of that, we'd love to hear that too.
It's the new project is very fussy at the moment, but I'm actually trying to take the method I have used to write books and articles and put that into a formula. Because I feel when you're looking at the question of, let's say somebody among the listeners here want to be more profiled in their space, or like be known as somebody who says smart things or whatever. Like we sometimes call that thought leaders. Some people don't like that word, but like that's kind of what it is. I think there's a method to that. And I'm not talking about the marketing and how to build a newsletter and so on. That's kind of the tactical how to share it, but more how to think. Like, how do you actually take your vast body of expertise in whatever you've been working with for 10 years and kind of crystallize what your central insights are that other people haven't understood? So again, it's very fuzzy, but it's something I'm really excited about, and I'm having a lot of fun conversations with people about it. So I think that's going to be the next thing.
That's super interesting, and you don't see too many people writing about that. So
no, that's why I thought it would be like with reframing. That was also a little bit of a blind spot. Like there weren't a lot of good books on it, so I figured, okay, here's a problem that people have overlooked. Let's delve into that.
Well, we might have to have you back when you're ready.
I love that.
Not so fussy. Any other insights for our listeners?
I would say a really crucial thing when it comes to reframing, solving the right problems, is to make people understand what you're doing. Like if you just go into a team and you say, hey, well, are we solving the right problem? People may resist because they are used to focusing on solutions. And a really powerful trick is to share the slow elevator example. Like if you literally take 30 seconds and say, hey, there is a building, they complained about the elevator, but then the landlord put up a mirror solving a different problem. That often creates enough space for you to start then having a discussion. Hey, do you think we're doing the same thing? Might there be a different way of thinking about this problem? Do we need to check in with a few customers and make sure we are understanding their needs correctly? That basic practice, share the slow elevator example, send them a copy of my articles or books or whatever. That's a deeper dive, but like just a slow elevator example, remember that, use it to explain to people why you're starting to ask questions about the problem.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. If you could just let people know, where can they find you? Where can they find your book? Reshare the name of your book again.
Yeah, the book's called What's Your Problem? It's published by Harvard Business Press. It is available on all of the usual places you get books. It's out in 13 different languages if you want to read it in your not English or whatever. And you can find all of that on either by just Googling my name or on howtoreframe.com. So the website howtoreframe.com. There's also the canvas I showed earlier and some extra free resources you can dig into.
Fantastic. And I'll put that the link to that in the comments as well. So thank you so much, Thomas. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks so much. And thanks for the amazing work you're doing with creating courageous cultures. I really, really enjoyed your book.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so next time on Asking for a Friend Live, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Whitney Johnson. She has a new book that is just coming out now. And so we're going to be talking about how do I keep my people engaged and growing in a post-pandemic workplace. And I have been absolutely enjoying her book. So I hope you can join us then.